you, Paul, Joe, and Kelly for that. We will start recording now. Good. Good morning and welcome to West Valley Unitarian Universalist Church in Glendale, Arizona, and welcome to our Zoom church service. I'm so happy that all of you are here today, and are you here to share it? As you may be hearing, we are having some technical difficulties with an echo that we've been unable to fix so far. So please bear with us. Considering we've been doing this for over 6 months now, and this is the worst problem we've had with Zoom, maybe we're lucky, but we will try to work on it. My name is Barry Linden, and I'm your worship associate and co-host for the meeting. Paul Darling is the other co-host and is the one showing the slides and playing the videos and the music as needed. Parts of the service will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel for later viewing. Due to the copyright issues, some of the music will not be recorded, and we will also stop the recording prior to doing our joys and concerns at the end of the service. You're then able to unmute yourself and give your joy or concern without sharing it with the entire world. Following the formal part of the service, we will keep the meeting running for a while, just to allow you to talk to each other as you would during a fellowship hour. These words are from Erica A. Hewitt. Whether you're here because worshiping with us is a part of your routine, or whether you feel like our country has been stopped in its tracks and it's impossible to return to normalcy, on this morning we gather to proclaim that we belong to one another and that others belong to us. Broken hearts are welcome here. Anxious spirits are welcome here. Minds whirring faster than a racing engine, uncertain what to think. Stubborn egos that sometimes trip us up, cementing us to opinions. Fragile, shell-shocked souls. Say it with me. They are welcome here. Yours, mine, and everyone else's. Not because this community will fix it through easy solutions or the right way forward. As a liberal religious congregation, we have something far more fragile and far more powerful than that. Our need to be together. Our need to reconnect to the life-giving source that moves within us and among us. And our need to make one another a little bit braver and wiser before returning to the service of life. It's so good to see all of you here today. I really miss seeing you in person. While we're not in the same space, I hope that all of us can find the connection that we've missed so much during the past few months. Here are our opening words by Nathan Ryan. Be it real or metaphor, whatever is in your backpack or your briefcase or your purse that you've brought into this sanctuary that is weighing you down, leave it behind. Whatever you're carrying that is keeping you distracted or caught up in shame or guilt or hopelessness, leave it behind. If you need it, it'll be there when we're done. But for this hour, just let it go. Come into this space with open hearts. Come into this place with a soul that has remembered how to be tender again. Come into this place with a renewed hope for this world. And come into this place ready to build a world we've always been worthy of and have always dreamed of. As you know, music has always been an important part of our services. We have had a number of very talented musicians playing for us over the years. However, one very talented person stands out as always being ready to help new musicians, accompany other musicians, and being consistently reliable in providing the music needed for specific services. This person, of course, is Joe Cleland. This past year has been a strain on everyone, and we've had to devise new ways of providing music since we cannot meet live. Joe has bent over backwards to record music, accompany others, and prepare music to be played. The worship committee has noticed this, and we wanted to provide some recognition of this. Therefore, we have gotten this plaque, which will be placed on the piano for all to see when we can gather in person again. Joe, I don't think we can adequately express how much we love you, value you, and appreciate you. But this is a token of our esteem. Thank you for all that you do. In the future, if anyone has announcements that you would like read aloud in the service, please send them to me and I will make sure that the worship associate has them for the service. Now, to begin our service, we will have the lighting of the chalice. Paul will light the chalice as I read from Ma Teresa Tet, Gustio Gallardo's words. We cast not our eyes below. We say to ourselves, we are how we came, wounded from struggles, triumphant in our survival, entitled by birthright to belong to this, the only humankind there is, saying, I am included, I belong, I am here, and I will be and do. I will breathe joy into a desolation. I will breathe peace into a conflict. I will breathe life into destruction. I will be the earth I wish to see. I am growth and hope and glee. In some denominations, there is a creed that must be agreed to when joining. Since our beliefs are so diverse, we don't have that. Instead, we have aspirations for ourselves and this community. Please join me in reading our covenant as Paul puts it on the screen. Love is the doctrine of our congregation. The quest for truth is our holy right, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in friendship. Thus do we covenant. When we were meeting in person, Sharon Moore developed some readings on our UU principles, and we included them in our services to remind ourselves about our principles. Here is one. Sharon writes, don't hide from life. Have faith that there is still an abundance of good in this world. Identify your own areas of concern about peace, justice, or liberty. Locate and serve on committees and task forces that work to make your neighborhoods, schools, and workplaces safer and fairer for all. Maybe you'll take a leadership role, or maybe you will bombard legislators or industrialists with frequent communications, asking for resolution of issues. Thank you, Sharon. We will now have our offering. These words are by Elena Westbrook. Far too often, we are forced to confront the terrible things that people can do to each other. When these things happen, all we can do is come together in places like this church to remind ourselves that there is still hope. There is still love. There are still good-hearted people who can look unblinking into the storm and continue to believe a calm, bright morning will come. This community is a refuge where we can keep the ember of hope alive when all the world seems intent on dousing it. And then we can use our little ember to light a beacon, a beacon for the rest of the world. Our offerings each week sustain this community so we can share our small embers to light a dark world. Please give generously so we can all, together, help spread that light. Please join me in giving so that we may continue to have a place that fortifies and challenges us in these trying and troubled times. You may write a check to the church and mail it to the church, or you may mail it to Mark Olerking, or you may use the PayPal link noted in the chat. We will now play the offering, and Paul will lead us in singing this familiar song. Although you will be muted, please sing along if you're willing and able.
We would be one, as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service with love and justice, strive to make us free.
Thank you, Joe and Paul, and thank all of you for your generosity. This reading is from Mark Nepo's book, The Endless Practice, Becoming Who You Were Born to Be. Quote, most musical instruments are hollowed out because if they weren't, there would be no music. Guitars are hollowed out. String instruments are hollowed out. Drums are hollowed out. Reed instruments are hollowed out. And flutes are hollowed out. This is a great example of the necessity of emptiness in order to make music. It's true with our lives. Each of us is an instrument that experience hollows out in order to have our souls release their song. A poem from Kabir, the flute of interior time. If you are never hungry, how can you know the contours of your stomach? If you're never thirsty, how can you know the edges of your voice? If you're never disappointed, how can you know the reaches of your heart? If you are never in doubt, how can you know the ceiling of your mind? If you are never empty, how can you know the fullness of your spirit? If you're never alone, How can you know God? Our speaker today is Reverend Cathy Corbin Menino, whom we are lucky enough to have as our supply minister and speaker twice a month.
Thank you, Barry, and Joe and Paul. After a week like this, I can't see any other place that I'd rather be than with you all. Hearing those words were such a comfort, and they were so gentle and so beautiful. And the recognition of Joe was so precious that I'm just a little bit weepy. So I'm going to take a big gulp and a big breath and just say I love you all and I miss you and I'm glad I'm here with you. Another breath. Shakespeare wrote, "My desolation does begin to make a better life." I have found this to be so, in hindsight. In that same vein, Japanese poet and samurai Mutsuta wrote, "My barn, having burned to the ground, I can see more completely the moon." I have found that to be so as well. Still, the theme of desolation was a bit uncomfortable for me because it meant I had to relook at times in my life where I have felt desolation. The definition of which, if you're looking at it as a feeling, is a state of complete emptiness or destruction, anguished misery or loneliness. If you look at desolation as a place, the meaning is empty and frightening because it has been destroyed by a violent force or an army. I had one such moment where I experienced a feeling of complete desolation. Maybe I'm fortunate that it was just one, but it was so intense that I actually considered implementing some way to discontinue my life. When I divorced my first husband, the plan was that I move into an apartment near the home where we had lived for several years so that I could remain close to my sons. As that home was soon to be occupied by his new wife, I certainly did need to leave. But I found I couldn't go through with that plan because, thankfully, a group of very strong and supportive women that I had worked with at the United Way of Santa Clara County in California sat me down when they heard of my situation and said, "Oh no, no. After a 20-year marriage, there is no way you should leave without any means of support. Consider this an intervention." So I did begin to change that plan, which meant that my ex-husband would either need to buy me out or sell the home and split the equity. Then we could both begin again anew. The plan, though legally solid and equitable, was not met with equanimity. I did make it through the various skirmishes, but suffered battle fatigue and PTSD. When the dust finally settled, I felt desolation, both emotionally, as misery and anguish, and as a place, having my home destroyed by a violent force. I moved out, items in storage, and was alone in a motel with the realization that everything which had previously given me a sense of identity and security was now gone. And I did not know how to move forward or even where to move to. I wasn't sure I even wanted to move anywhere, any longer, at all. I cried and prayed for hours until I finally fell asleep, with my final thought being from Psalms 30, verse 5. "Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes in the morning." Well, joy didn't actually come in the morning, but there was a definite shift. I knew somehow that since I made it through that night, I would survive. And just as Shakespeare wrote, that desolation was the beginning of a better life. Better in the sense that I was entering a more honest way of being, with a sense of being true to who I really was inside. No more role-playing, because there were no more roles to play. Minister's wife, mother, choir director, women's ministry leader, early childhood education teacher, all my roles had been dissolved, or at least left in desperate need of redesigning. And yet all that loss turned out to be a very good thing. There was a podcast on Spotify called On Being with Dr. Atul Gawande, who is a physician and writer of Hindu background. He said that the first quick cure to feelings of desolation and emptiness is by reframing the main question of our lives. Stop thinking, should I go on? Should I simply give up? And start thinking this: what am I fighting for? In his work with patients who are ill and maybe dying, he came to the realization that it isn't all about the patient living for a long time, but rather about how this person spends however long their life may be, doing the things they love. In other words, he says, spirituality appears to be the patient's real purpose. Because the reality is that every one of us is living a finite life. So stop the discussion of whether to live and focus on what we choose to live for. So then if my purpose is spirituality, I need to know what is spirituality. He says that spirituality is the place or thing by which we can learn to love ourselves. What really matters in this kind of spirituality is learning to heal by finally choosing to love ourselves. Healing emptiness is understanding spirituality as self-love. Love for who we are and acceptance of who we are, no matter who we are. No matter how much we have previously refused or resisted loving ourselves, no matter how many times we call ourselves unworthy or unlovable. The feeling of emptiness is because we abandon ourselves, and we do it way too often. We judge ourselves, we numb our feelings with substance abuse, we make other people responsible for our happiness. In this state, we will find ourselves wounded, and we have to realize that we hold very false beliefs of ourselves, and so we need to get rid of them as soon as possible. However, author Dr. Margaret Paul, in an article in the Huffington Post, writes, many, if not all of us, tend to feel our emptiness rather than heal it. And we do that through all kinds of unhealthy substances, unhealthy activities, or through seeking others' approval. Our society is filled with addictive ways to externally fill up inner emptiness. TV commercials are constantly playing to the millions of people who are forever trying to fill the empty place within. Sugared and processed foods, clothing, cars, new homes, gadgets, plastic surgery, cosmetics, drugs, vacations, or the right relationship. All these commercials show people looking happy and fulfilled as a result of buying the advertised product. These are short-term solutions, nothing more. Inner emptiness is never going to be filled by people, things, or activities. It is not the lack of any of these things that cause inner emptiness. Inner emptiness is caused by two things: a lack of connection with your own feelings and experience, and a lack of connection with your spiritual source of love and guidance. Both must be present for fullness of being. When your intent is to avoid pain, you can even use your spiritual practices as means of avoiding pain. This is called a spiritual bypass, because you are attempting to avoid your shadow side and go right to the light. This would be like going into a room and meditating while your actual inner child is crying in pain. This is no way that would be considered a loving action. When you are unwilling to feel the deep existential feelings of loneliness, heartbreak, grief, helplessness over others, desolation, you abandon yourself to avoid those feelings. You stay in your head rather than present in your body by numbing out or judging yourself or blaming others. So of course you will feel empty when you refuse to feel this inner experience of desolation. When you are willing to feel your core painful feelings and learn to name them, be with them with compassion, learn from them, and finally release them rather than avoid them, you will then also feel the core feelings of love, peace, joy, passion, aliveness. It is experiencing these wonderful core feelings that give us the feeling of fullness within. But since all these feelings exist in the same place, in the heart, we will not feel the wonderful feelings without also being willing to feel the painful ones. In his book, Barry mentioned, The Endless Practice, Becoming Who You Were Meant to Be, Born to Be, author and poet Mark Nepo describes this as the sweet ache of being alive. He writes, when the sweet ache of being alive, lodged between who you are and who you will be, is awakened, befriend this moment. It will guide you. Its sweetness is what holds you. Its ache is what moves you on. He goes on to write that we are each born with a gift and an emptiness. It doesn't matter where the emptiness is in our life or what the gift is. It's always the journey of a life to discover how they meet and complete each other. We waste so much time trying to hide our emptiness, feeling ashamed of our emptiness, trying to eliminate our emptiness, feeling victimized because we have an emptiness, or feeling we're entitled not to have any emptiness, that we are diverted from our soul's journey. This diversion gives rise to the blame game and keeps us from inhabiting the depths opened up by the emptiness that can only be illumined by the light of our gift. Emptiness is a significant part of our journey. We fear desolation because it seems to destroy the very things that make us human and make our ego thrive. Thoughts, feelings, emotions, ideas, charm, beauty, intelligence, relationship, ambition. But surprisingly, that's exactly why emptiness is such a blessing. It forces you to look under the hood of your life and see what you are beneath the shining veneer of humanness. What is there? After all your human qualities are stripped away, your roles eliminated, is there any you left? Who is breathing now? The truth is, now you can experience the divine on the divine's terms, not human terms. Like the barns of self-interest that block the moon in the sky, when they burn down, we can sense our true relationship with the vastness, the emptiness that some call God. Taoism teaches that the divine has no name, no quality, no traits. It is emptiness. And emptiness is the merging with the source of creation. That's why the central symbol in Buddhism and Taoism is the wheel. There is the rim and the spokes, but what is essential for the wheel to operate is the emptiness in the middle, the hub, the hole into which an axle can turn. There is a story in Judaism that I just love, and it says, in the beginning, or in the time before the beginning, before history, before there was anything other than God, God decided to create the world. Why is a mystery. Perhaps he was bored. Perhaps she was lonely. Maybe he had read a self-help book about expressing her inner artist. No one knows. But there was nothing but God, the tale says. And so in order for the world to come into being, God had to make room within himself. She had to create space, a place of emptiness into which the world could become. And the space he created was in the part of herself that is known as the Shekinah. This is a word used often in the Hebrew Bible and usually refers to the presence of God, the sense of God's holiness. It is a feminine word. Hebrew has genders, so it is perhaps the feminine aspect of God's presence. As the world was created into the empty space of God, bits of the Shekinah, or another definition is glory, were embedded, so that everything that exists has a bit, a spark of the sacred, a piece of the holy in it. Perhaps that is what Mark Nepo refers to as our gift. Our task as humans, it is thus believed, is to see the sacred in everything, everything, and release it until ultimately God will be one again. Martin Buber wrote, "The world is not comprehensible, but it is embraceable." Poet Mary Oliver wrote, "Where does the temple begin? Where does it end? There are things you can't reach, but you can reach out to them. And all day long, the wind, the bird flying away, the idea of God. And it can keep you busy as anything else, and happier. The snake slides away, the fish jumps like a little lily out of the water and back in. The goldfinches sing from the unreachable top of the tree. I look, morning to night. I am never done with looking. Looking, I mean not just standing around, but standing around as though your arms are open and embrace. And thinking, maybe something will come, some shining coil of wind or a few leaves from any old tree. They are all in this too. And now I will tell you the truth. Everything in the world comes, at least closer, and cordially, like the nibbling, tinsel-eyed fish, the unlooping snake, like goldfinches, little dolls of gold fluttering around the corner of the sky of God, the blue air. Mark Nepo adds, if a bird can't open to the emptiness we call the sky, it will never fly. And if we can't give in to courage and let ourselves feel the sweet ache of being alive, our wings will never open. Many religions teach that emptiness is so essential to the spiritual life, so much of a blessing that we may need to take the initiative of emptying ourselves from time to time, so then we might experience being filled. You may meditate, you empty your mind. You do yoga, you empty the spaces your body inhabits so we can move into those spaces more freely and gracefully. We create space in our life to make way for what is new. Emptiness, desolation, is not a sign of laziness, weakness, or bad character. It is not an indication that something is wrong with you. It is not a symptom of being stuck or a sign that your life is going off track. It is not a manifestation of bad karma. It is a result of massive emotional imprints from past wounds and traumas. It is a sign that you're shedding your old concept of who you are and that you are getting ready to rebuild the you from the ground up. It is a transformation in progress for your ego. It is a necessary step towards living life as an effortless expression of divine grace. John Muir said, going out in the beauty of nature, I found that I was really going in, because the beauty found in nature was like a mirror to my soul. And so he wrote, in emptiness, there are no complications, just simplicity. In emptiness, there is no confusion, just clarity. In emptiness, there are no costs, just freedom. In emptiness, there is no selfishness, just selflessness. In emptiness, there is no waste, just efficiency. In emptiness, there is no pollution, just purity. In emptiness, there are no distractions, just mindfulness. In emptiness, there is beauty. Reverend Dr. Jim Nelson wrote an explanation of why there is beauty in emptiness. Because even when nothing else is there, no input, nothing coming in and stimulating you, you are there. You remain. You are receiving the input. That's why true spirituality is about loving you. And why is that beautiful? Because even if you lost everything else, you'd still have a connection to yourself. Losing everything outside yourself or losing awareness of those things doesn't lead you to an ugly or bad place. It just leads you back to you, your own little home in this world. So you may not be perfect. You may not even consider yourself beautiful. But maybe you can see the beauty in being able to be with yourself. Khalil Gibran said, the deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Isn't not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven? Mark Nepo asks us to consider how a simple well dug in the ground can only hold as much water as the well is deep. And so it is with us. The digging is always painful, because experience hollows out the instrument that it uses. Yet somehow the bottom of personal emptiness, if we can reach it, brings us to a common song of being. By its very nature, this digging, this opening of depth within us is uncomfortable, even as it opens us to the largesse of being that some call God. If we can endure the emptying, the space unearthed is often a resource that can introduce us to joy. I'd like to close with another poem from Mary Oliver. Why I Wake Early. When death comes like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps the purse shut, when death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like, this cottage of darkness? And therefore, I look upon everything as a brotherhood and sisterhood. And I look upon time as no more than an idea. And I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular. And each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending, as all music does, toward silence. And each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. UU Minister Reverend Dr. John Barron says, we live between desolation and consolation. They are the very poles of our existence. The way we live in that space matters forever. May we all persevere in seasons of desolation. May we trust the movement of our hearts. May we embrace the world and open to new clarity and consolation, which I'll talk about in a couple of weeks. May it be so.
Wow, thank you, Cathy. Thank you for speaking to our hearts today. Please join me in reading our mission statement, which Paul will put on our screen. Even though I will be the only one you can hear on the screen, please read it with me. We agree to provide a safe place to celebrate diversity, draw inspiration for living better lives, foster social and environmental justice, and compassionately support each other in our spiritual searches. As I extinguish the chalice, I want to thank everyone who made this service possible. Paul for hosting, Joe, Paul, Jeanette, and Kelly for the music, and Reverend Cathy for our talk. I also want to thank all those who work behind the scenes to make this church a going concern. Cathy?
The benediction. May you move through this week asking, what holes have been carved in me by life, and what song can be released through the flute of my being?
Thank you. We will now stop the recording and go to our postlude.